Let's talk about some of the fights. My question is, will a Boston salmon be able to survive the desert, James?
I don't think he's fighting on this card.
I thought he was. I thought he was fighting.
No, his opponent's out. He's. I don't think he's fighting on the card.
So he can't. The answer was that he can't. You have Rick Glenn against Kevin Aguilar. You've spoken to both of these guys.
Yes, Kevin Aguilar, don't sleep on this guy. We saw him on Contender Series, didn't have a very good performance, but that was a short notice fight up a weight class at lightweight. This guy is a killer on the regional scene. He was the LFA champion for a while. He's got a 15-1 record, has knockout wins over UFC veteran Damon Jackson. I mean, a lot of his wins are highlight reel finishes. And he's taken on Rick Glenn, who I know he's coming off a win over Bermudez, and he certainly has the experience here. But I don't know. I think Aguilar's a guy to keep an eye on as a dog in this one, because I think he's very live in terms of this matchup, and it should be good. I mean, Glenn likes to trade strikes as well. I think this is going to be potentially fight of the night here with Glenn and Aguilar.
There are a couple of other familiar names on this prelim card. We have a former Habib victim in Daryl Horcher, but Tim Means and Ricky Rainey. Tim Means is always a good fighter to watch, Joe.
Sorry, I lost you there for a second.
I said Tim Means is always an entertaining fighter to watch, at the very least.
Dirty Bird.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely love seeing him. He's a heavy favorite, though, minus 340 against Rainey. I don't know if I like that. Ricky Rainey, guys, tell me if I'm wrong, but I might put 5 on Rick. I mean, there's a bit of a gap there. I know Tim is a fun fighter to watch, but that to me is a bit of a gap. I thought it would be more in the minus 250 area for Tim Means, but yeah, this is going to be a fun fight. The card itself doesn't have too much of a name value. There's some good fights on there. I think this is going to be one of them, and I won't be surprised if Rainey pulls off the victory here.
There are also some fights that actually matter. Joseph Benavidez, who may be looking at a different kind of future with the bantamweight division going in the direction that it is, he's looking to get back on the right track. He had won 6 in a row, lost to Sergio Pettis via split decision earlier this year, was set to face Ray Borg earlier this month, but Borg pulled out. Instead, he draws Alex Perez. What are you looking for out of this one, James?
I'm looking for Benavidez he really needs this win. He really does. That was not a good performance against Pettis, a fight that he was supposed to win. And now he's the underdog in this matchup against Perez, Perez, Joe, he's coming off the biggest win of his career over Jose Shorty Torres, completely dominated him. I mean, that fight, Torres just looked completely lost, and Perez coming off a big win. And we should point out, this is at 25, despite the fact that they are getting rid of that division. And Perez cuts a lot of weight to get to 25. He'll make weight, but just something to consider as well.
They would even book it there.
I don't know. Well, Ben Wynn's also fighting at flyweight as well this weekend, and he's against Wilson Hayes. So that's a fight as well that for some reason is at flyweight.
We have Antonina Shevchenko, the sister of Valentina, competing on the card against Ji-Yeon Kim. Ji-Yeon Kim has won her last 2 fights, but you got to imagine, with this being Shevchenko's coming out party, essentially, Joe, UFC wants her to pick up the win here.
Yeah, and I think the odds are also inflated in this one here because of the name value at minus 280. And in looking at how these odds basically started, she was up in the minus 270s, and then it dropped down to minus 385. So it's kind of moving up again. So I think the name value is what's driving the price here. They definitely want her to win. They're, as weird as it sounds, they really like Valentina, obviously. Although Valentina has questioned some of their motives and stuff like that, especially with the previous bouts that she's had, especially with the decisions that were, not given to her before. But they are fans of the Shevchenko family, of the sisters. So I think a victory for her here would be great, make her look good. It's still a fight. We never know what's going to happen, but I think they're banking on potentially building her as well in the division.
James, Darren Stewart is an interesting name. He came into the UFC, got that win over Francimar Barroso, but had it overturned due to a headbutt, then lost 3 in a row. And usually when that happens, you're gone. You hit the bricks. He's now, after that, looking for his 3rd consecutive win, and is on the main card. I believe he's on the main card right now of this show. No, actually, he's on the prelims. But he's facing an undefeated opponent. Such an odd, unique trajectory for this guy.
Certainly is. And we should mention that Edmund, I believe that's his name, is actually part of Glendale Fight Club with Edwin Trevinian, Ronda Rousey's old coach.
I ain't got 5 on him.
Well, I was going to say, put 5 on Stewart. He's the underdog here. And, Stewart's got a few more fights than Edmund does. Edmund looked good on Contender Series. That's what, got him on the got him into the UFC. But Darren Stewart, I mean, both of his fights against Spicely and Bird, he wasn't looking good in the early on, and he was able to come back. So, I mean, that's something to consider here, because Stewart right now is the underdog. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I anyone that fights at a Glendale Fight Club, you got to put an asterisk next to it, because you never know what's going to happen.
Let's talk about one of the more interesting fights on this show. Brian Caraway visiting Munoz Island, because that's what he's got to feel like he's doing this weekend. He's got no Misha Tate. He's got no top position in the bantamweight rankings. The guy almost never fights, and now he's fighting twice in a year for the first time since 2014. He's got some good wins. Aljamain Sterling, Eddie Wineland, Eric Perez. Those are good wins. However, in his last fight against Cody Stamann, I thought he had a nice, fast single leg, and that was really it. That was really all I saw. Pedro Munoz has a little bit more than that, and this is a very dangerous fight for Caraway. I'm interested in what the future of Caraway is after this, because obviously UFC probably doesn't give a damn about Misha Tate anymore, or whatever that relationship may be between the two. She hit the bricks and visited one championship. Joe, who do you see winning this fight? And if Caraway loses, what does that mean for him? He hasn't finished a guy since 2014. He is like rapidly just descending down the ranks.
Yeah. Well, it's been a long time coming in terms of him descending down the ranks. He did come out with an interview and said that his head is clear. Everything's been taken care of. It was a rough patch for the past year or so, maybe 2 years. But in Pedro Munoz, it's going to be a tough scrap. I think these odds are exactly where they need to be. Minus 245 for Pedro, plus 205 for Brian Caraway. It's not a fight I'm putting 5 on either guy, but I am looking towards Pedro to, weather the initial storm and then just completely take it over.
James, what do you think of this one?
Well, more than just a rough patch, there's a lot of stuff people don't know about Caraway. First off, he was technically a free agent earlier this year. He basically begged Dana White to get back in the UFC. He got new management. They worked things out. So Caraway at this point thought, was starting to look at like ACB and everywhere else. So that's something to consider. I mean, he's getting a second chance here. Second thing is, aside from the Misha stuff, which has been well documented, don't need to go into that, his dad suffers from PTSD, and he actually flew him into Vegas to live with him. And his dad apparently is now in like a home, and he's being taken care of. So Brian had a lot going into that Cody Stamann fight in a matchup like Sean referenced that was pretty close, could have gone either way. So I expect Brian to look a lot better here. There's probably a fire under him to sort of prove people wrong, including the UFC. Joe says there's no value on this fight. I think there's value on Caraway here. Now, Pedro Munoz, I should point out, really good, impressive winning streak here. The win over Rob Font, especially during that streak, has looked great. Looking back on it now, just with Rob's down, he beat Brett Johns in his last fight. Pedro's last 2 losses were against Dodson and Jimmy Rivera, both split decisions. So a really tough cookie here. If I'm making a pick, I'm going with Munoz, but don't count out Caraway here. I think there's definitely some value on him as an underdog, just with the fact seems like he's got everything in order. And the other thing also I didn't mention with Caraway, his coach died, obviously, Robert Follis. So he's had a lot to weigh on, before his last fight. Now he's ready to go. We'll see what he's like with a clear head.
Yeah, his world has definitely crumbled. You got this main event, and it's a good one. Kamaru Usman, Joe, who you know very well, taking on Rafael dos Anjos. If Usman wins here, he's got to be in the title conversation. I mean, he should be anyway, but this is the fight that he needs to win to get there. Can he do it, Joe? Or will he do it, rather?
Can he do it? Yes. Will he do it? Obviously, remains to be seen. He is a minus 270 favorite. I think that is based on Rafael's last performance per se. Not last performance per se. I think there's a little bit of a youth factor here in Kamaru, in my opinion. It'd be interesting to see how, because Kamaru has really shown that he's a cerebral fighter. He will not engage in his opponent's strength. He will take his opponent to where he believes he has the strength. We saw that in the Damian Maia fight most specifically. So I think Kamaru does emerge victorious here. I think if it was up to him, he'd prefer more than 15 minutes. He's happy that he's got more than 15 minutes to get the job done, because with Rafael dos Anjos, you've got to be very, very careful because, man, does he have a lot of power there. Rafael can knock out Kamaru in the blink of an eye and can potentially submit him as well. So Kamaru is going to be very strategic in this fight, in my opinion, and hopefully he does, for my sake, just on the personal level, he does emerge victorious so he can come with me to Kazakhstan next month and call a Titan event. So, interesting.
James, your thoughts on this main event?
I think we saw the catalyst of how to beat Rafael dos Anjos in his last fight when he fought Colby Covington, and you could argue that Kamaru Usman is potentially a better wrestler than Colby. Is he going to have the same pace? That's the question. Can Joe referenced it there. The longer the fight goes, it favors Usman. I mean, we'll see how his cardio is, going 5 rounds, but that's the way you do it. You neutralize RDA. I mean, Robbie Lawler had a difficult time with RDA in that fight, where RDA was basically just outstriking him, doing pretty much what he wanted, had the leg kicks. If I'm Usman, I'm going back to my wrestling, and I'm really holding Rafael against the cage. It might not be a pretty fight, but I think Usman will get it done because, again, you saw in that last fight against Colby, if you want to beat Dos Anjos, you neutralize those weapons and you hold them up. And, Dos Anjos couldn't keep pace, and I have a feeling the same thing's going to happen here. So I'd look at Usman by decision. And just looking at that prop, actually, because that's something worth doing. Usman wins by decision is -140. So if you wanted a little bit more value there, I think that's probably the way the fight goes.
Yeah, I've got Usman in this one. And